Hello, you are watching the application project of Jordan Rhodes made for the Educational Psychology course taught by Daniel Abbott. In this presentation, I will describe in detail several main topics of educational psychology that have been discussed throughout the semester. The subject areas to be discussed are behaviorism, self-efficacy, development, and group differences. Upon discussing these, I will explain in greater detail how these apply to my personal philosophy of education, which consists of these 5 main points. I believe that whole person development, teaching the value of learning through course content, guiding students to understand the learning process, providing experiences and opportunities for real application of knowledge are critical to a sound teaching philosophy. In the end, I want students to leave with the confidence that they can solve problems with which they will be faced in the future. Now to the first topic, behaviorism. Behaviorism is the study of human behavior. The 4 terms I defined as part of this portion of my application are operant conditioning, response, reward, and punishment. Making sense of the 4 unique terms, it is important to understand that the goal of operant conditioning is to change a behavior by rewarding an emitted desirable response or punishing a response that is not desired. Now I would like to spend the majority of my time in this subject area discussing how behaviorism and its major concepts relate to my philosophy of education. I believe that one of the greatest impacts a teacher can have on a student is to teach them the importance of behavior and emotional development by enabling them to freely examine their thoughts and gain greater perspective on their behavioral tendencies. We discussed different methods of modifying behavior, such as operant conditioning, in which a response was rewarded or punished, and classical conditioning, in which a response is associated with a second unrelated stimuli, resulting in the emission of a response to the new stimuli. I believe that students must learn socially accepted and selfless behavior. Different conditioning methods are tactics that can be used to achieve this goal. While somewhat primitive, those methods can be useful in teaching students what is and is not acceptable behavior. In addition, I plan on using the rewarding aspect of operant conditioning to encourage desired behavior and make it a point to increase the frequency of that behavior, rather than simply pointing out and punishing non-desirable behavior all the time. If you can remember back to my philosophy of education, I believe that whole person development is an important duty of today's school systems. Behaviorist ideas and conditioning methods have proven over time to work well with even the most mindless creatures. However, human beings do have minds and can think. Simply put, they are much more dynamic creatures. I am beginning to see the behaviorist approach is not the only answer to many issues that will show up in my classroom. While operant conditioning will be important to successful classroom management, I must be able to address classroom issues in a way that does not just deal with the simple behavior and ignore the mental aspect of behavior and its motives. If I am effective, my methods of teaching must mold students into responsible beings that truly understand the consequences of their behavior. Behaviorist approaches will provide short-term results in my classroom, but the possible lack of long-term modification would prove me to be a rather ineffective educator unless I am able to incorporate understanding along with the conditioning regimen. Make no mistake, conditioning methods will be used in my classroom. I just believe that there is more to behavior modification than just mindlessly changing an action. Operant conditioning does emphasize mental processes, such as satiation. But I really want students to go beyond a stimuli-response chain and understand the ramifications of their behavior. After thinking about how knowledge of behaviorism fits into my philosophy of education, I proposed a few questions regarding behaviorism in the classroom. Is there any way to eliminate classical or operant conditioning from the classroom? How successful do I think operant conditioning can be? And what should be considered when consciously using operant conditioning? Next, self-efficacy was a major topic discussed nearly every week of the semester, clearly illustrating the importance of this idea in the classroom. For this section, 4 important terms are self-efficacy, motivation, initiation, and resilience. They can be organized by noting that self-efficacy level significantly affects the levels of intrinsic motivation, which is critical to initiation and resiliency, actions that are the outward display of one's self-efficacy. So how do these apply to my philosophy of education? It will be important that I recognize students with varying levels of self-efficacy and understand how that will affect my teaching methods. When assessing self-efficacy, it is important to ask how confident one is that they can perform the task, then conclude about self-efficacy after the overall confidence assessment has been made. I must be able to use different techniques to provide experiences for the application of knowledge that allow for the increase of self-efficacy in students who have low levels of self-efficacy. As an educator, It is a major objective to raise the self-efficacy of students through successful completion of class activities in order to build confidence that they can go into the world and become a productive member of society. It will certainly be a battle with some students to get them motivated to learn, and in some cases, getting a student initiated in an activity might be a real accomplishment. By supporting students when they fail, I will cultivate an environment that encourages resiliency. In the end, I want my students to leave the classroom with the confidence and self-efficacy that they can solve any problem with which they are faced in the future. Self-efficacy is a far-reaching concept and seems to apply to nearly every major topic area discussed in this course. Because of that, I have formulated these questions to further thought about this concept. Next, I would like to focus on development. The concrete operational stage and formal operational stage are both part of Piaget's theory of development, while the zone of proximal development and scaffolding relate to Vygotsky's theory. Both Piaget and Vygotsky's theories of cognitive development are organized around the idea of increasing working memory capacity. There are some important aspects of Vygotsky's theory that I would like to take some time and relate to my philosophy of teaching, as I feel they are of critical importance to my overall mission as an educator. Because of the nature of science as a research-heavy field, I have every intention of using a large amount of inquiry-based learning. With that being said, it will be important that I guide students along the way. By doing so, I will be utilizing Vygotsky's zone of proximal development concept. I've spent a good amount of time thinking about using layered curriculum and individualized instruction to keep students working within their zone of proximal development. I want to do my best to avoid assigning mindless work, or work that they will likely fail doing. By giving work that they can accomplish with help, guided inquiry can be a very useful teaching method. Also within Vygotsky's theory is the use of scaffolding. If I'm to be effective, I must be able to properly challenge students to expand their knowledge, a job that I will be able to facilitate well by drawing upon what they know, what they are learning, and where their knowledge will lead. By scaffolding information, I will be creating more hooks to which they will be able to hang new information. To sum up how I see development occurring, I want the student to be able to take control of their learning by using myself and other resources to guide them while increasing their zone of proximal development. I've proposed these 3 questions regarding development for the viewer to think about. The last main subject area that most concerns me as a future educator is the idea of group differences, specifically the idea of socioeconomic status. Here, you can see that I defined 4 concepts related to group differences. To relate those terms, socioeconomic status is one of the most dramatic variations seen in schools and communities. Socioeconomic status affects many aspects of family life, including parenting styles. Children from relatively high SES families tend to have mission-oriented parents, while children from low SES families tend to be raised with permissive parenting. Several weeks ago, we discussed how socioeconomic status of students greatly affects the classroom. From motivation to desire to succeed, socioeconomic status plays a major role in the overall mentality of students. For me specifically, the SES of the students in each class will dictate which methods I will be able to successfully utilize. Students will come to my classroom each with a different set of needs that I must strive to meet. Many of these needs are a result of what they have or do not have in their home. As I point out on this slide, parenting styles will greatly affect my classroom and the overall mentality of my students. It is very important that a teacher be cognizant of the fact that their vision for their classroom must align with the most effective way to reach students of varying demographic. The role of an educator and school system is to provide the most resources and support possible to try to meet the needs of every student. The socioeconomic status of students will greatly influence how I approach this task. I intend on modifying my teaching strategies to fit the general SES of my classrooms. Keeping a proper perspective will be critical to motivating and engaging the students. I encourage you to think about these 3 questions regarding socioeconomic status and group differences. I discussed only 4 important areas of educational psychology. Certainly, there are many other areas that have helped me develop my teaching philosophy, but these 4 really stand out as topics that have really affected my mission as a teacher. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.